persecute them. But on his way to Damascus, where he was going to continue his work, he's stunned and converted and becomes a Christian himself. And at that point, he begins a work of converting non-Jewish people to Christianity. And as a result of this, you end up with certain conflicts between him and what he calls the pillars of Jerusalem. The pillars of Jerusalem would be the apostles of Jesus who were still living in Jerusalem. Peter, for example. And so at one point, Paul actually, by the way, his original name was Saul, but he changes his name to Paul. But Paul goes back to Jerusalem to dish it out with Peter and the others, because what he's been telling the people, the Gentiles, that he's been spreading the gospel of Jesus to, is that you don't have to be Jewish to become a Christian. You don't have to follow Jewish practices. You don't have to follow the Jewish law. Biggest issue, adult males do not have to have circumcision in order to become a Christian. If you're a baby, you don't even know about it, but when you're an adult male, it's quite a serious event if you're going to have a circumcision. So he told people they didn't have to do it, but he goes back because Peter and the others are all saying, oh yes, you can only be a good Christian if you're also Jewish in the first place, because it was a Jewish sect, right? Well, they have an argument. Paul figures, it's all settled then, I'm right. Of course, the others didn't think so, but in any case, Paul ends up spreading the word, the gospel, much more rapidly than others, and as a result, Christianity becomes a new religion that does not require you to become Jewish in order to become Christian. So what is the interesting aspect of Paul's letters that led some theologians to say that Paul, the inventor, I spelled it right. Well, is it the founder? No. I want the inventor. Much more radical. Rats. Here we go. That's the one. Let's just go. There we go. Oh well. So the title of the book that I'm trying to refer to, not very well, is The Mythmaker. Paul, the inventor of Christianity, is that correct?
Paul and the invention.
Paul and the invention of Christianity. Why the invention? Obviously, Jesus is the founder of the religion, but Paul merges the stories of Jesus with the current scientific view, the Greek scientific view of reality, which is that of Plato. Remember, Aristotle really outmaneuvered Plato, but because of the way things happened, Aristotle's work wasn't known to that many people, so the dominant view was the Platonic worldview. And so Paul puts the stories of Jesus into this Platonic context. And we end up with the converts that Paul has made, believing that Jesus was going to return any day. And once he returned, everyone who was saved, were all going to be taken to either heaven or to some kind of new life here on earth. And he was very persuasive, apparently. Very charismatic, very dynamic, despite the fact, by the way, that he was, I think, lame, plus he was short, plus he was ugly. He had all the characteristics that you wouldn't expect him to actually have these abilities to persuade people, and yet he clearly was. And he's the one that says all of that, by the way. But in the letters, he basically argues that in response to the questions from the people he's already converted, they ask, well, so-and-so died, and you promised eternal life to all of us if we became Christians. So what about so-and-so? And Paul's response was, when Jesus returns, so-and-so will rise from the dead and once again be alive for all eternity. And initially that response was quite scary. It's kind of like the rise of the dead. The Greek people knew what dead people looked like after just a short period of time, and the image of all these dead bodies coming up out of the grave was not really very attractive. So in response, Paul tells them, well, don't worry, your friend will have a perfect body afterwards. They'll rise with a perfect godly body, etc., etc. So in examples like that, Paul literally ends up creating what becomes believable dogma associated with Jesus. Now, that's a Platonic view. It places Jesus in a situation where what he's done by dying on the cross for us is not just suffered as a revolutionary that's killed by Rome for his behaviors. And by the way, remember, he was probably a follower of John the Baptist. And what happened to John the Baptist, by the way? Find one with a white dress. Oh, trigger warning, this is bloody. Sorry, I should have said that before. Anybody lose their breakfast? No? Okay. It tasted so wonderful. Sorry, I better... That's enough, right? Actually, there's some better performances, but the neatest ones are where the Salome is wearing a white dress, holding the head, and the blood is all dripping down all over the white dress. And by the way, the next performance, the dress is white again. I don't know how they do it. It's not real blood. just so you know. So this is a scene from Salome, an opera by Richard Strauss. Richard Strauss, just a quick tie-in, was a contemporary of Freud. And all of his operas are about powerful women. Believe it or not, the focus on Salome is on Salome's ability to persuade Herod the Great, who was the man in the tuxedo to the right, and that was Herodias, her mother, in the purple gown in that scene, just so you know. And what happens in Salome, the opera, is John the Baptist, who has been captured because he keeps preaching against the status quo, and especially against Herod, has been captured and thrown into a cell in the basement of the palace, Herod's palace. And the voice of John keeps yelling and explaining to everyone all their sins. And it's driving Herod mad, it's driving Herodias mad, and they can't stand it, but Herod is scared to death of him because he's a holy man, and so doesn't want to kill John, but Herodias wants him dead, get him out of our life, right? And Salome ends up offering to perform a dance for her father in order to appease his appetite. He's quite a horrible person in the opera. And so Salome does the famous dance of the seven veils. You've probably even heard the music, right? And maybe even seen the dance. It's very famous, where she dances with seven veils, and each part of the music she removes a particular veil. You know how that goes, right? And so she absolutely pleases Herod, and so he says, and he had promised her that she could have half of his kingdom, right, up to half of his kingdom. And so, what do you want, for doing this wonderful dance? And she says, I want the head of John the Baptist. And he, absolutely goes crazy, but that's what he promised, and she insists on it. So sure enough, the executioner cuts off the head. And that interesting scene, it looked like the head was still attached. No, but in any case, the normal is that they bring a silver schutzel, a silver tray with the head of John the Baptist and the blood. And she grabs the head and kisses the mouth, and just knocks everyone crazy over this until Herod yells at the very end, kill that horrible woman, his daughter. And they usually have the scene where all the soldiers come with their shields and they just all batter her to death in the middle of the stage. End of the opera. You know how the opera ends. They all end after the fat lady sings. Although notice, normally, because she has to do the dance of the seven veils, not a good idea to have an overly robust soprano do the piece. One of my friends saw the opera in Seattle one year and said that the soprano was very large, and that watching her do the dance of the seven veils was absolutely, he didn't appreciate it. So John the Baptist, once John is dead, Jesus picks up teaching for the John's group. The followers of John end up following Jesus. And what was Jesus teaching? He was teaching let's go to